Yo, it's your friend Dinner Dog. And it's the holiday special. The librarian looks like Santa Claus. I've got a new bird on my shoulder. The bird's cool. And it's a great opportunity for us to talk about the shop. So the shop is a really cool place in the game. We get all sorts of neat stuff there, but we can lose a lot of time there too. Like it's easy to get tunnel vision to the shop and then lose track of, oh yeah, I'm in a race because I'm making so many considerations. We do want to buy things, but we need to look at what is a valuable thing to look at and what things can we potentially wait for later. So give me one moment and let's start off with some music here and let's make it happen. So looking at faster shopping. In this video, we're going to look at the shop layout first to take a look at how it works and where things are located. We'll then look at a typical first visit of the shop because it's typically when you're going to lose the most time. We'll take a look at within that where we would do some ideal menuing and a good strategy for it. And then money grinds. Where do we want to grind for money? When do we want to grind for money? How much money do we want to get? So let's break into it here. So the shop layout. So even though this is a randomizer, the layout of the shop is going to be the same every single time. The items that you get will be different, but you can see in this middle bar here, the categorization. So the first option presented to you will always be a relic or progression item if it happens to have one. So like in OG, you're always going to have a relic and progression there because it doesn't use guarded locations. In presets with guarded or that have more relic checks than the normal game has, you may find nothing here, and it'll just start a use item for $800. Anyways, the next items are always going to be these items in the categories. They're always going to be for this much money. So like that part of the game is not randomized. So taking a look at the order here and what we'll find. So 0 to 1 relic or progression items, 17 use items, which doesn't include food. That's amazing. We get 40% of the potential options in non-food use items within our visit to the shop. That's a crazy ratio, and one we don't want to take for granted, especially because use items can be extremely powerful here. With weapons, we're going to get 7 of them. There'll be no two-handed weapons, so sadly no Yasasuna, and no thrust sword shenanigans through the library, which actually balances the game quite well. I appreciate that. So 12% potential items here, or weapons there. 16% of shields with 2 of them, but we don't really care because what we really want is like any shield, and for $400 it's a good deal. 4 pieces of headgear equaling 20% of the potential items. That's not great, especially because headgear is a fairly weak category. 3 pieces of armor, and we don't really care what armor we have because armor stats are randomized in a lot of presets, so typically we just want the defense from it. We don't really care what else is going on. Capes, we have 3 of them. You know, a good chunk, but we don't really care about capes. More about that later. And 4 accessories. It is a fairly small percentage, especially if we look at everything else, but accessories are so powerful that any information we can get about accessories is going to be extremely valuable to us, so it's really good. Now, with the shop, you've got a lot of things you need to look at, in particular with item stat randomization. So, it works the same way that item randomization works anywhere else in those presets, where the name is randomized within its category, except use items. So use items, we can just look at the name and know what it is. The sprite will be randomized within its categorization, and the only thing we can really rely on is the description here. So we know this Marcel is not a Marcel, it's a Mournblade, and we're going to get souls from it, but we also don't know what the damage is going to be, so we have to feast our eyes on the other side of the screen too. So there's a lot of noise here, right? Like we've got a lot of things going on in the shop, and we need to make sure we're paying attention to the right things, or just recognize that our eyes need to go to a number of different places. So having a strategy for the shop can help us to get through quickly and focus our eyes in the right places. So looking at a typical first visit of the shop, usually if you're following the standard route that a seed will take you in, you're going to get there fairly early, you're not going to have a lot of cash, so you're not going to have a lot of options. Ideally, you've got $500 to be able to buy the relic, but oftentimes you don't have that. But if you don't need the relic and you're in the shop and you got a bit of coin kicking around, we want to look at where can we spend our time that gives us value, where we can actually purchase the item or get information that's really key to us, and not spend our time with bullshit that we don't care about, all right? So let's tier list this out. So relics, high tier, because you know what? We need them, right? Cheers to relics. Whether or not they're hard required, typically they're really good. Vlad relics, movement options, power of mist, spike breaker, all those kind of things that can be really cool. So S tier, especially in its location, right? We're going to see it immediately. Chef's kiss, right? In A tier, I have use items, and the biggest part is that they're affordable. There's so many. Like, look at this heat map I've got here, right? How many use items are in the green? It's fantastic. So many of them are under $500. It's really cool. You've got a wide range of them, because remember, 40% of the use items are going to be in here. And those use items have a huge impact, especially if you get Library Card or Mana Prism. But even the others, like buying singles of them, can be really good. So you want them. With accessories, you probably can't afford an accessory, but it's still A tier because it's exceedingly good information, right? You need to know if there's a duplicator in the shop. You must know that, right? You need to know if you're going to come back for it. So checking out the accessories has a lot of value, even though you probably can't afford it. Shields are great. You don't care what shield's there, you just want it. You kind of care if it's an Alucard shield, but typically, shield, give it to me, I want it. Fast movement, a bit of defense, affordable. Shields are great. Weapons, surprisingly, not as great. Like, first of all, weapons are fantastic, but you're only getting a small cross-section of the available weapons in the game. And they're pretty expensive. $1,500 for a weapon? Like, you might be able to do it, but you probably can't, right? You're probably not going to be able to afford it unless you got some gems. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that if you're playing with a preset that has stat randomization, you may be thinking, well, I'll look at the weapons now, and then I know what to buy later. You will not remember. You will not remember, okay? You are wasting your time almost every time. Sure, if you see a Chrysogrim, slices, like that countless item stuff, you know you're going back for it, no problem, right? But outside that very niche case, right, you're probably not going to remember anything, right? You're going to be getting a bunch of items like 1-hit, 2-hit kind of deals, right? And you're not going to remember, and even if you do, you're not going to remember which one it was, right? Like, it's not worth your time, right? We typically just want to skip over the weapons unless you've got cash for it, especially in item stat randomization. Like, when I watch back races and I see people spend like 20-30 seconds considering the weapons in the shop that they can't afford, I lose my mind. And like, typically those people, they're going to lose the race, right? Like, 30 seconds is a long period of time. So weapons can be great if you have money, and they are very impactful, but you're not likely to remember. If you're playing like OG or other presets that don't stat randomization, there's more value to it, but otherwise avoidable. Armor's kind of D tier. And like, armor's great, like, and I typically kick myself for forgetting to buy it, especially when I do have money. But at $1,500, it's kind of hard to justify over the other options. Like, just like, don't die, right? Like, yeah, get good, right? No, I'm kidding. Like, don't take that mentality. But the armor isn't going to give you the value that other things probably are. And even in the situations where you do need armor, like, having a use item can get you through some of those situations. Like, just like heal through it, get iframes, use pictures of dad, like all sorts of good things. Can be useful, but like, you typically aren't going to focus too much on armor. And then F tier, like, guys, I accidentally listed cape here twice. I'm going to remove this, but like, you could like actually, yeah, like cape, you know what, if anything, like, let's bold under, like, we don't care about capes, all right? Capes are bad, all right? First of all, $2,000 for a cape. All capes give you is constitution. Constitution does give you defense at a 2-to-1 ratio, but like, armor is cheaper. And like, constitution, its main purpose is to get you out of whatchamacallit. It gets you out of status and effects faster, like curse and poison. It's not really that great. Skip over capes. Its best values for fashion souls. Maybe that's why it's an F tier for fashion. And headgear, like a $400 option exists here, but typically the only headgear option that you really want to focus your attention on is like Dragon Helm, right? And so like, you're only going to get 20% of the headgear options in the shop. And of that, there's only like a 25% chance that if it is in the shop, they'll actually land in the slot that you want to buy it in if you don't have a lot of money. So we don't care about headgear, right? Now, just before we go forward, if you are playing on item stat randomization and you do pick up a gem, the great thing to keep in mind, because it'll help you out for thinking ahead in terms of what things you want to look at, is that A zircon is always going to have the description of sparkling ring, and what's absent is valuable. Any ring that has the word valuable in it is worth more than 500, which means you can buy the relic in the shop. Très bien. So fairly valuable is going to give you a good amount of money. Valuable is going to be very nice, and then diamond, you just do whatever the hell you want, right? I mean, you're pretty much doing anything. So those are some things we want to focus on here, right? We want to focus on use items. We want to focus on accessories. We want to grab a shield if we've got the money for it. Otherwise, we don't want to look at the shield. We don't care about it. Because like the typical times that's actually going to make a difference, unless you already have Mole Blanc or Shield Rod, are going to be few and far between, right? Just get the hell out of there if you can't afford it. All right. So speaking of being ideal, let's look at some ideal shop menuing here, right? So what we want to do for our strategy is we want to view and purchase high tier items and avoid considering lower tier. And when I mean items, I mean like categories, all right? So what I do today, which isn't great, is I use a combination of the D-pad to get around and LNR. And especially like Talik's been big on this, and I can see why, especially now that I've taken a bigger look into it, is that the LNR buttons really help you out, especially if you understand where they're going to take you, and if you take a deep dive into how the menu is built here. So R1 is always going to bring your cursor to the bottom of the current page you're on. And then if you are on the bottom of that page, it's going to bring you to the bottom of the next page. It will always do that. So if I'm on the third row, it's going to bring me to the last row. If I'm on the first row, it's going to be the last row. If I'm on the sixth row, it's going to bring me to the last row. And then if I hit it again, it will bring me to the bottom of the next page that I'm currently have myself situated. So if I haven't used the D-pad to scroll up or down into other options, which what I mean by that is going further below so that I get this use item rather than this one here, then it'll always consistently work the same way into the dots that I've placed them on. So knowing that, we can focus on high tier categories and get to them very quickly without scrolling through every item and being tempted to take a look at other things. So to do this, I've discovered a really cool rule of 3. So here's how it works. When we first get into the shop, our idea is through the first 3 pages, we're going to read practically everything, because we're going to look at the relic and all these pretty use items here. So if we start on the page and just say, okay, I'm going to read, and then I'm going to hit R1 to bring me down a page, or bring me to the bottom of the page and hit it again, right? So one press gets me to the bottom of the first page. The second press gets me to the bottom of the second page, where I'm going to read all of the items. I don't need to toggle over all the items with the D-pad, because even in stat randomization, use items maintain their actual name. So I can read them without bringing the cursor to them and know what they are. Fantastic. Then I'll do it again. So 1, read. 2, read. 3, read. And I can take a peek at the weapons if I want to, but I don't really need to, right? So 1, 2, 3, and I'm reading. And then after I'm done with my reading, I'm going to 1, 2, 3 quickly, because I don't give a shit about this page or this page, but I do about the last page here, right? So we're going to 1, 2, 3 very quickly to look at the accessories, all right? And we can move the D-pad cursor at this point to see what the accessories are, because especially in stat randomization, we'll need to actually read the description. So that's really fun. Once we've read through those, we can just go back to the top of the page using L1 and then get the use items we want if we are going to buy a use item. Or if we just want the shield, we can use the rule of 3 again. 1, 2, 3 gets us onto the page that has the shield, and then R1 one more time will bring the cursor to the bottom, or you could use the D-pad, and then you'll be able to get access to the $400 shield there. You can do this to save yourself a ton of time, thumbing through the menu with the D-pad, getting tempted into looking at things, right? You can save 20 or 30 seconds using this strategy. To be clear, I don't use this right now, but as of today, I am using this. I haven't looked into this, and I think that there's a ton of value here to save time. I definitely was using the focus on use items and accessories, especially in the first visit to the shop strategy, but now I think I can shave off another 5 or 10 seconds. So there's tons of time to save if you focus on the high tier items in the shop. And there's even more time to save if you use the options available in the shop to menu appropriately. Whoops, there goes Birdie. Birdie, where are you going? Oh, you want to be by the camera? Okay, you can chill there. Awesome. There's a toy at the top of the camera. That's why Birdie likes it. Alrighty. So knowing that, let's look at one more situation. And just very quickly, this rule of 3 applies even if you are using item, or if there's no relic item in the shop and everything gets shifted up, it still works. You can pause the video here if you want to take a look at it more in depth, but the rule of 3 still applies and you'll be fine. If we need to grind for money, there's two situations. One is that we're in the library already, and we're probably trying to get to 500 to get the relic, or there's like a really juicy library card and we're like $50 dues away, and we're going to spend the time to do it. Be cautious on that strategy though, because unless you have a duplicator, you need to really think about how much time you're using to get the library card, and how much time the library card is actually going to save you, in depending when you use it. So the best place to grind in the library is up here. So jumping on top, going towards Lesser Demon, and feathering ourselves back and forth in this room with the flea armors and the Durons. And the reason why this room isn't really impactful is we can safely do soul steals at the edge of the room, kill the enemies in there, because they're kind of tough, especially the flea armors with that big axe and doing a ton of damage. But we can kill them very quickly, reveal what item drops they have, if any, and then pick them up, or go back into the save room, refill our MP, and then rinse and repeat. It's the most efficient way to grind money. The only drawback is you need to be able to get up there with either like Leapstone or like some other kind of shenaniganry. So typically you're not going to be able to get up there, but if you do have the opportunity, this is the best place to grind money by far. Otherwise, there are two options. Option number 2, which is within these rooms here, is great because they're dense rooms that we can quickly refresh the room in to respawn all the enemies. The only drawback to room number 2 is that it's very far away from getting back to the actual librarian. So we only want to use this option if we're in the library and we need a lot of money, right? Like, let's say you get to Fairy Scroll up here, right? And you have no relics. So you know the librarian has to have a relic that that will progress the game for you. And you look at your menu, you're like, shit, I only have $150. Don't even bother going to librarian. Just beeline over to this area here and grind for money. And the additional bonus of area number 2 is that there is an item underneath the librarian. And maybe that's money, right? Or it's a weapon, or it's something else, right? There's value for taking a peek over here. Otherwise, you just want to go through these rooms and respawn the enemies, typically in the room to the right-hand side, so that when you get the amount of money you need, you can bounce. And typically, I tend to bounce before I get 500, hoping that I'll get a bag along the way, so that I can cut down my return time to the librarian to see what the relic is and then purchase it. Otherwise, in room number 2, you just need to be careful because the axe flea armors are there, and they can hit you like a truck. Even the Durons can be a bit difficult. Sorry for the camera shake, the bird's on top of it. And yeah, so just be careful there. Otherwise, you just want to be in this corridor at number 3. You want to be able to kill books, especially if you have a sword, because you can kill books really quickly because they're weak to cut. Otherwise, they're kind of a pain in the ass if you just have your fists or a blunt weapon. But just stay in this corridor, get the few bags that you need, and then go to the librarian. Like, this is a great area to be in if you just need $100 dues, or less, ideally. Or hopefully you don't need to grind at all, but if you do, this is a great area. Go to the librarian, get what you need. Now, lastly, before we end this bad boy, what if we have Cube of Zoe, and we happen to want to grind for some cash even before we get to the library? If we're going to do this, like, obviously getting to 500 is a no-brainer, but how high do we want to go depends on a couple of things. Like, what's your game state at that period of time? Like, what weapons or other items do you have? Like, how hard do you need to rely on the shop, especially given your abilities? And where you can actually grind. So like if you can find a candle beside a room transition, that's perfect. Especially if you find one that's worth a lot, like a $400 bag by a room transition, très bien. So the cash breakpoints, I feel like if you can't get a ton of cash because you've got like a $100 bag grind you're doing, $1,000 is plenty of money. $1,000 gives you access to 10 of the 17 use items in the shop, which is fantastic. Or you can buy a relic and a shield, or you can buy the relic or 8 of 17 of the use items. Fantastic. $1,000 is great. $1,500 is pretty good. You can still get access to the same amount of use items, and you can get the relic or the shield. $1,900 is probably a really good place to stop or to consider. I don't need anything more because I'll be able to get at least one item, at least the relic, and at least the shield. or maybe even more items if I don't need the shield or I don't end up buying the relic. The beyond that, if you're gonna grind beyond 1900, 2000, the next breakpoint is this 4500 to 5000 range, because at that point you can buy a relic or one of the 2 accessories that would be available at that price point. The 5000 is great because you can also buy the shield. Of course, you can feather in use items there too as well, especially if you don't end up buying an accessory. You have tons of cash to buy a use item, or you can actually at that point start affording weapons reliably, and it may actually make sense to take a peek at them. You just have a good degree of flexibility. So that's it for this video. Unfortunately, the Librarian is not like Santa Claus and is not going to be able to fill your stocking full of toys. He was not even going to fill your stocking full of coal, because coal's valuable. The Librarian wants that cold hard cash. So doesn't have the spirit of the holidays, but I hope you do, and I hope this video has filled you with it. Anyways, that's all for me. Hope you've enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one. Obviously, pinned comments and stuff will have corrections as always. And cheers. Take care.